Hello, Garland Nixon here, back with Dr. Tony Monteiro, and a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about the Trump phenomenon, but mostly from the perspective of the American people. Let's talk. Hello, Garland, back. And you may notice something. I've got a join button now. So if you want to become a member of the channel, just click on the join button. And I can see we've already got one of our new members up. So thank you very much for everybody that joins. All right, Dr. Tony Monteiro, welcome back to our YouTube channel. You're certainly a very, very popular guest. And let me just say this for those who don't know. I first saw Dr. Monteiro on a particular podcast on YouTube, and I was watching, and I'm like, man, I don't know who that guy is, but I got to talk to him. And I struggled, and I tried to, and I found people that knew him, and then finally I was able to get Dr. Monteiro available and to interview him, and I've never looked back. So let's start here. And I think this is something we got to mention, although it's kind of dark and something you don't really want to talk about. There have been assassination attempts with Donald Trump. We are at the almost at the 20th, of a week or so away. Some very suspicious circumstances involved. In fact, one of the guys had been in Ukraine a lot, and his wife was connected to some dark and mysterious CIA related company, and she apparently paid all of his bills. I have got my fingers crossed, but I'm not 1,000,000% sure that they won't try take another swipe at Donald Trump or try some other nefarious deed or diabolical deed to stop him from taking office on the 20th of January. Your thoughts on that, Tony?
Yes, Garland, thank you for having me again. Most definitely. These are not normal times politically in this country. And of course, to even talk about the things that you're talking about, the inauguration, and will he make it to the inauguration? And if he does, he's still not safe. The backdrop for it all is the election of 2024. There had never been an election like this in the nation's history, where a candidate of a major party was defined literally as an enemy of the state, who threatened not only the opposite party's reelection, but threatened the institutions of the country and the nation's democracy. In the course of this, there were 2 assassination attempts on his life. We cannot trivialize them. And so on election day, the American people rejected the narrative of the dominant sections of the ruling elite, and not only gave Donald Trump an electoral college victory, but a popular vote victory, which had not happened since 2004, and before that had not happened since 1984. This was unusual for a Republican to win the Electoral College and the popular vote. And this over everything that had been thrown at him, including lawfare, all of these indictments and impeachments and congressional hearings into January 6th and on and on. It was unbelievable. But this victory was not Trump's victory alone. This was the people who rejected the narrative. And so, that's one side of it. The other side is the media, its ubiquity, its power, its partisanship. The fact that the media is not a media in the sense of journalists giving information and analysis, but it is a partisan, one-sided affair that are all, for the most part, not all, but most of it lined up against Trump. So he had to discover a way of getting his message through without being brought into a no-win situation concerning the media. That continues today. But then the world that he enters as president is not what it was in 2017, is not what it was in 2020. In fact, the US, in relationship to the rest of the world, is much weaker than it's ever been in the last 80 years. Has never been this weak. I would argue that the West has lost Asia. We heard recently that Indonesia, the 7th largest economy in the world, is now a full member of BRICS. A full member, not a partner, a full member of BRICS. Indonesia is one of the most populous countries in the world. So you have increasingly the majority of humanity in one or another way linked to BRICS. Then you have the Chinese initiative known as Belt and Road. That goes forward. Then the other thing, I think on the 17th of this month, Iran and Russia will sign what is a strategic military and economic alliance. Now, when you say a strategic alliance, you're literally saying that if Russia is attacked, Iran is obligated to come to its defense and vice versa. And then on top of that, we are now in a fully multipolar world with the French being kicked out militarily out of Senegal, out of Mali, out of Burkina Faso, and now out of Chad. And as they kick the French military forces out of their country, they also, this signals their growing closeness to China and Russia, to BRICS, and so on. Then let's look at Trump, because the question on a geostrategic level is, will Trump initiate a new war, especially in the Middle East? Will he find a way to end the war in Ukraine? Will he substitute economic competition with China with war over Taiwan? So this presenting Trump as a president of war is being put out there. However, the leaders of countries that he speaks most highly of continually are Vladimir Putin of Russia, Xi Jinping of China, and Kim Jong-un of North Korea. Not Macron of France, or Starmer of England, or Schultz of Germany, or any of them. They are Asian leaders, which suggests to me that he finds something appealing in the national politics of their country, by which I mean Donald Trump wants some form of imperial retreat, at least imperial military retreat. He does not want war, even with Iran. I guess the last thing that I would say just on this is that Trump recognizes and has said so. Oh, by the way, in terms of war and peace in the Middle East, he put up on his, I think, X account, this lecture, this statement by Jeffrey Sachs concerning Netanyahu and the Middle East.
Well, before we go further, let's look at that. Our guests might not have seen it. So I've got it right here. Let's take a look at it, and then we can get your comments on it. Donald Trump shared this, I believe, on his Truth Social account. But now, keep in mind, Donald Trump shared this video himself. He had a reason for sharing it. Let's take a listen.
The war in Syria, and you may actually hear from grown-up reporters who are lying through their teeth or ignorant beyond imagining that, oh, the war in Syria, yes, Russia intervened in Syria. Well, do you know that that Obama tasked the CIA to overthrow the Syrian government starting 4 years before Russia intervened? What kind of nonsense is that? And how many times did the New York Times report on Operation Timber Sycamore, which was the presidential order to the CIA to overthrow Bashar al-Assad? 3 times in 10 years. This is not democracy. This is a game, and it's a game of narrative. Why did the U.S. invade Iraq in 2003? Well, first of all, it was completely phony pretenses. It wasn't, oh, we were so wrong, they didn't have weapons of mass destruction. They actually did focus groups in the fall of 2002 to find out what would sell that war to the American people. Abe Schultzky, if you want to know the name of the PR genius. They did focus groups on the war. They wanted the war all the time. They had to figure out how to sell the war to the American people, how to scare the shit out of the American people. It was a phony war. Where did that war come from? You know what? It's quite surprising. That war came from Netanyahu, actually. You know that? It's weird. And the way it is that Netanyahu had from 1995 onward the theory that the only way we're going to get rid of Hamas and Hezbollah is by toppling the governments that support them. That's Iraq, Syria, and Iran. And the guy's nothing if not obsessive. And he's still trying to get us to fight Iran this day, this week. He's a deep, dark son of a bitch, sorry to tell you, because he's gotten us into endless wars, and because of the power of all of this in the U.S. politics, he's gotten his way. But that war was totally phony. So what is this democracy versus dictatorship? Come on. These are not even sensible terms.
Here's what's interesting about that, and I'll throw this to you and get your comments. I've been watching Dr. Jeffrey Sachs, a man who I have great respect for when it comes to his take on international policy. And he said a few months back, I watched him, and he said, look, he has, of course, of contacts. He says, I called the Biden administration and I tried to say, don't do this. And I tried to say this is dangerous. And they wouldn't listen and they wouldn't take my calls. The Biden administration wouldn't listen to him. Yet Donald Trump is playing a video of his that flies in the face of everything we've told about Donald Trump being a Zionist warrior that just wants to attack Iran. I find that interesting. Who's more reasonable, the Biden administration or Donald Trump, who we are told is some kind of a reactionary madman?
No, there's no question. And if you look at the bottom of that post, Donald Trump writes, if the CIA overthrows governments in other countries, they 100% do it here.
He should know. He should know. They're trying to kill him. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I am a bit confused by those progressives who have a narrative that's so selective that they miss all of this. They miss Jeffrey Sachs. They miss what Trump has said about Ukraine. They miss these kind of statements, and they want to act like we're in the worst time that we've ever been in politically in this country. We might be in the throes of a turning point in this country. And ironically, Donald Trump might be part of the mechanisms, the vehicles that will make that possible. And I think, like you have pointed out, the country, the nation, the people of this country are in deep trouble, and they know it. The people know it. A report came out about a week ago. Homelessness between 2022 and 2023, I think those are the years, increased 18%. 18% homelessness increased. The people, the working people, are not doing well in this country, and they are angry. So, you know, Garland, I'm, as I've said before, I think not only are big powers players in history at this time, but the American people are players. They are in play. The American people have a big role to play and have a lot to say about what will happen. Just in the same way, and this is very important to me, in the same way that it was the people who decided who would be the president. The people, and especially the working class. You can't get around it. And if they decided this most consequential election, are they not capable of deciding other questions such as war and peace? And I believe, as I listen to Trump, I know he has, let us say, a media strategy of misdirection. For example, he will talk about, I want to buy Greenland. I want to take back the Panama Canal. I want to create something that looks like a new Monroe Doctrine. Could that be just misdirection, performance for a media that will grab onto anything that they can find to portray or present a negative narrative about Trump, when in fact, he invited Xi Jinping to his inauguration.
Yes, he did.
I mean, if he wants war over Taiwan, why would he invite Xi Jinping? Or, as he made statements in the past that got little attention, that he would not defend Taiwan against China, against being reintegrated into China. There's tons of evidence that he is not the president of war. But at the same time, he knows, and anybody that has an ounce of sense knows, that you cannot take on the entire deep state all at once and expect to survive. Already, you know, with the appointments or the proposed appointments of Kash Patel to head the FBI and Tulsi Gabbard to head the National Intelligence. I mean, come on, what are we talking about here? When he admits that the CIA has overthrown governments all over the world and they will do it here. I mean, this is not your normal Republican president. This is not your normal American president. This is a person who might not have it all right, and I don't think he does. But one thing is certain: the Biden administration unleashed the dogs of war. Under the Biden administration, the knives of assassination were brought out, and they lost. Trump is not Biden. Trump is not as dangerous as Biden. Trump does not want a war with Iran. That was shown in his first administration, if you recall. I think it was in 2017, somewhere around there, 2018, when the Iranians shot down an American drone over Iran. And the generals and a lot of think tankers and a lot of neocons wanted to go to war with Iran. And if you remember, Trump said it would not be worth it. There would be too much death over something that was not that important. Certainly, he took responsibility for the assassination of Soleimani. I don't forgive him for that at all, But he did not want all-out war with Iran. Matter of fact, he might be a president committed to imperial retreat. Now, a lot of people try to tag him with the 2025 agenda. I would suggest that he is not committed to cutting Social Security. I mean, it doesn't take rocket science to know that the coalition that was built up to elect him, he starts cutting Social Security, that's over, that's finished. But somebody has to find a way out of the policies that have led to a $37 trillion government debt, which is a burden on the economy and on the average citizen that we cannot bear. Someone is going to have to find an answer to the problem of this technology, artificial intelligence and robots that could lead to 40% of the existing American workforce losing its jobs. These questions have to be answered. And just to answer the problems of the American people cannot be done in an atmosphere of war and preparation for war. I think, and I'll say this, and we can debate it. Trump might be the beginning of a great transformation in American society, from the Cold War to a policy that looks like extreme nationalism, but is not, but a retreat from war and an emphasis upon peaceful coexistence with nations that the neocons have defined as enemies, such as China, Russia, and North Korea and Iran. So Trump might turn out to be one of the most transformative presidents in American history. But how it comes about will be circuitous, will not be a straight line. Trump will perform as he does, as a distraction from what he's really doing, or in a way not to too much antagonize or create more enemies for him than he actually needs. So I agree with what you said in the beginning, Garland. The inauguration is on the 20th. Let's hope we get to that. And then after the inauguration, let's hope that we prevent more attempts on his life, because the assassination or more assassination attempts on his life can only lead to greater conflict in society and could set off what would look like a civil war in the country.
A good point. And now it's something else I think is interesting, and that is the traditional Democrats or the traditional liberal class tried to paint everyone who was a Trump supporter as just a mindless zombie. They're doing what they're told, and it's hero worship. But one of the things that I think is consequential when you look at the people that voted for Trump is, and I know people who voted for Trump who just said, I don't like him, but I voted for him. Why? Well, they'll have a number of reasons. It could be war and peace. It could be the economic plight, etc. But these are not people who are Trump quote the image of the Trump supporter. You know, a guy with a camouflage hat and a pickup truck and a gun rack and all that image that they created. Yeah, I know brothers in Baltimore City voted for Trump. Latino people voted for Trump. Women, a lot of people voted for Trump that the traditional liberal class would say they'd never vote for him. And it wasn't Trump they loved. So why do I say all that? We've already seen something interesting. If those people were simply blind Trump supporters, Trump could tell them to jump off a cliff and they do it. But some of Trump's inner circle, Ramaswamy and Musk, started tweeting and saying things that working class people didn't like. And they came after them immediately. I think it was a message to Donald Trump. I think it was also a message to everyone. The American people are unhappy. And they're hoping that Trump is a vessel that they can use to get to a better place. But they will hold his feet to the fire. And everyone, they are not blind supporters. And the American people are saying to Trump, Trump, we want something different and we expect it from you. But if they don't get it from him, that they'll come down on him and say, that ain't what we want, Donald Trump. And I think it was a good message for the American people and the voters to send to Donald Trump. And although the liberal class will never get it, you and I will pick up and say, yeah, Donald Trump, you do not have a free and open hand to just do whatever you want in violation of what you told these people you would do. Your thoughts, Dr.
Yeah, I agree with you. The people are an active force in American politics in a way that we have not seen in decades, probably since the great civil rights period and the anti-war period. The people are a force that have to be considered in going forward. And the working class is a factor in politics that they have not been in many, many, many decades. How do we know this? Almost all of the leaders of major unions in this country, including the AFL-CIO, were supporting Biden and then Harris. But the majority of working people, including the majority of members of unions, voted for Trump. Black leaders, the black political class, were almost unanimous in supporting Harris or Biden. However, the black people, the black voters, did not follow them. Either they voted for a third party or Trump, or they did not vote. They did not see Trump as the existential danger that the Democrats and the, quote, liberals had defined him as. I think, as I've said before, and I believe this deeply, that the people, especially working people, have become a factor in American politics that they were not supposed to ever become. Of course, the elites, the most educated, the wealthiest people, well, they will decide. But this election showed the opposite. No, you will not decide. To the black misleadership class, and this is one of the positive outcomes of this. If you live in these cities like Chicago and Philadelphia and Baltimore and Missouri and anywhere, you know that black people have had it up to their necks with the black political class, their lying, their betrayal, their deceit, their corruption. And this goes up to the Black Congressional Caucus. Black people are tired of them. So given a choice between the Democratic machine, let us say in Philadelphia, and Trump, a good part of them decided not to vote, and another part of them decided to go with Trump. So I think it's very heartening. It's going to be difficult. No one ever said that social change would be easy. Hopefully, it will not be violent. Hopefully, the framework set by Martin Luther King and Baldwin and the civil rights movement could prevail, but we can't say for certain. But what is certain, that we are on the cusp of something new coming into existence. Well, the other thing, and this is not an absolute certainty, but it looks like the Democratic Party might continue to cycle downward, which means that labor leaders and the black political class and so-called civil rights leaders, and I say so-called because they're not, they just brand themselves that way, Latino leaders, women's leaders, youth leaders will increasingly abandon the Democratic Party. That's why they're always talking about, we have to now communicate better with the working class. In case you didn't know, James Carville, it's too little too late.
You've already communicated with them.
Yeah,
You know, that's what you communicated with them.
Yeah.
You know, Biden now, he's given Hillary Clinton and Liz Cheney, you know, these great awards. What they don't understand is everything they do communicates to the working class.
Yes.
And we have to communicate. You don't have to try to communicate with them. The working class people are watching you day in and day out. Right now, Joe Biden, there's an issue in California with fires and another disaster, right? Another, whatever you want to call it, a natural disaster, however you choose to phrase it. And what does Joe Biden do? He's making sure $500 million more goes to Ukraine. Right now, I do recall when I knew that Pennsylvania and Ohio were gone, was when they had this train in East Palestine go flip over, blow up everything, all kind of horrible chemicals. And that very month, Joe Biden's priority was working on getting $60 billion for Ukraine. So it seems to me that every time there's another natural disaster here, it's an impetus for the Biden administration to send more money to Ukraine. So what they don't understand is that is a form of communication. And now post-election, it seems to me that they don't have the political, ideological, or economic vocabulary. They do not have the ideological vocabulary to talk to the working class. They only talk about them. Everything I listen to something like this. Well, the people didn't want this or did want this, or we should communicate like there's some group over here, these lowly little people. We have to figure out how to talk to them. We must talk amongst ourselves about them, rather than communicate to them. Whereas, and again, I'm not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent. Donald Trump's putting on a French fry apron, right? That's communication. Donald Trump is now in a garbage truck with a yellow vest on, going on stage with that. What the Democrats don't understand is that is communication. And so now, even as the working class, if you turn on any of the neoliberal, either podcast or news, all you hear them doing is talking about the voters. No concept of talking to, or God forbid, with the working class, so they can hear what the people want.
Oh yeah, yes, and but this is why, I don't think it is a leap to foresee the fragmentation of the Democratic Party. First of all, what it called unity were all of these separate groups: LGBTQ, women, blacks, Hispanics, labor, and then you bring them all together in some kind of an alliance to win an election, but not to change anything in society. Well, identity politics failed. in the November election. More than anything, class politics prevailed. This is very interesting, I think. You know, if you go back to the 60s and 70s, it was not unusual to hear a leader, a spokesman, a writer talk about the possibility of race war. We haven't heard any talk about race war these days. What we hear more than anything is, if you want to put it in war terms, is a class war. Working people in North Philadelphia and in West Philadelphia, whom I know best. I do not know better than any other. That's why I always talk about them. Have more in common with white people in the deindustrialized city, small city of Butler, Pennsylvania. They don't know each other directly, but they do know each other in a different way because their conditions are the same. This is another very interesting thing because, you know, this narrative that Donald Trump is leading a white supremacist movement, he's a white supremacist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The nation is less racist today than it's ever been. Less racist. We're not there yet, but less racist. Especially working and poor people are less racist. Now, that is where we start from right now. Where we take it, how it develops is another question. But if Trump is the great racist, the great Nazi, and all of this type of thing, how do you explain that the working class, the base of his voters, are less racist today than they were, let us say, 60 years ago? And how do you explain, if this is a racist movement that elected him, there's no talk of race war? Okay, so somebody's going to find somebody that voted for Trump in, let us say, Idaho, who puts on a Ku Klux Klan or Nazi outfit and spouts racist rhetoric. Well, but Trump got, close to 80 million votes. So you take a few people to smear 80 million people. Or do you say that because they do not agree with, and I put quotes, liberals and, quote, progressives on questions of trans people and so on, does that make them bigoted? There are many people who have questions, do not agree, and want to know more about just what the trans or queer movement is talking about. That does not make them bigoted, especially when you use people's positions on cultural questions to attack the poorest and the working class part of our population. And that's pretty much what it's all about. I think when you look at the total architecture of this moment, which we must do, and we must be sober-minded. We cannot, and the other thing, stop relying upon the bourgeois media to set the context of discourse. I mean, if you are a serious person, you will at least go outside the mainstream to begin thinking about and talking about the situation in the country these days. If you want to be acceptable to the liberal establishment, which is really not liberal, which is neoliberal and neocon, but if you want to begin there, if you want to start with what happened on November 5th as a catastrophe, as a beginning of the rise of fascism in the country, if that's what your belief system is, and you have no way to critically interrogate your own beliefs, let alone those of the dominant ruling class and its media, if you don't have that, I would suggest that maybe you should chill. Maybe for maybe a month, you need to stop talking and listen more. Maybe you need to visit not a psychiatrist, but a sociologist who might be able to explain to you methods of understanding human behavior from a social point of view. There is something going on in this country. Donald Trump got it more right than Kamala Harris and the Democrats did. He understood that the American people are war-weary and are poor. He got that right. It is a dark and tragic landscape when you get down to the grassroots. Go to these cities. Go to these impoverished suburbs. Go to these small deindustrialized cities. And then the future, as the ruling elite sees it, is artificial intelligence and robots that will take more jobs from the American people with nowhere for the working class to go. You know, Garland, your family comes out of the longshore industry. Mine does too. I worked in that industry for a short time. If AI and robotics are employed in the longshore industry, there's no reason to believe that more than half of the existing workforce, which is diminished from what it was in the 60s and 70s, but even that, 40% of them will be wiped out. The same for the auto industry, the same for other industries, trucking and so on. We are looking at an impoverished people, an economy that serves a few, unequal economic and so on benefits. And this is the world that Trump comes into. And anyone, I believe, anyone who calls themselves progressives, who could so easily vote for Biden-Harris, I think you need to rebrand yourself. You need to rethink your own political identity. That would have been the worst choice, certainly in terms of war and peace. And as you say, hundreds of millions of dollars going to Israel for a genocide and to the Ukraine, and you can't even do anything about these fires out in California. You nickel and diming the people. East Palestine, Ohio, nickel and dime us. You understand? But everything the Zionists in Israel want, everything the neo-Nazis in Ukraine want. And then anybody that dissents or anyone that stands up to challenge that, you have to be concerned about whether you're going to be alive the next day. And we're not making this up. We're not making this. 2 assassination attempts on the man that had already been vilified through the media, the courts, and so on. I mean, you know, this is not a normal situation politically for this country. It is abnormal, and it might be the start of a transformative moment in our history.
Let me show another video. You mentioned the issue of war and peace. I'll show you another recent video of Donald Trump. Listen to what he says and get your thoughts on it.
So, you know, a big part of the problem was Russia for many, many years, long before Putin said you could never have NATO involved with Ukraine. Now, they've said that that's been like written in stone. And somewhere along the line, Biden said, no, they should be able to join NATO. Well, then Russia has somebody right on their doorstep, and I could understand their feeling about that. But there were a lot of mistakes made in that negotiation. And when I heard the way that Biden was negotiating, I said, you're going to end up in a war. And it turned out to be a very bad war. And it could escalate. That war could escalate to be much worse than it is right now. They can never join NATO. Well, my view is that it was always understood. In fact, I believe that they had a deal and then Biden broke it. They had a deal which would have been a satisfactory deal to Ukraine and everybody else, but that Biden said, no, you have to be able to join NATO. So, a big part of the problem was Russia for many, many years, long before Putin said you could never have.
I've been listening to a fascist propaganda. Really, that's the way I put the last 4 years. Just fascist propaganda, lie after lie. Oh, Putin woke up. He hates democracy. He wants to expand the Russian Empire, blah, blah, blah. And I listened to 56 seconds of Donald Trump, 56 seconds. And those 56 seconds contained more truth than I've heard from the Biden administration about that conflict than in the last 4 years, which is none. Your thoughts on that particular comment?
I've held this position about Trump since late 2023, that in fact, it was the Biden administration that unleashed the dogs of war and has brought us close to nuclear war. It is the Biden administration that has upped tensions in the Taiwan Straits and in the South China Sea. It is the Biden administration that has financed the genocide in Gaza. It is the Biden administration that is the most war administration in our history. I'm just so grateful, Garland, that you share this information with people. Listen to what Trump said. And we knew this for some time, that he was opposed to the war in the Ukraine. He was impeached over it, in fact. His meeting with Zelensky and claims that he tried to blackmail him or whatever. He was impeached by the House of Representatives. The world is the opposite of what we're being told by the mass media. It is the opposite. And that does not put Donald Trump or anyone in his administration above severe critique. They must be criticized. They must be challenged. But to say that Biden or Harris would be better, that is crazy. They would have brought us even closer to war with Iran than Donald Trump would. They would have increased the use of missiles to attack Russian territory, in fact, to occupy parts of Russia. They would have been more anti-China, anti-BRICS. And just they had unleashed the war dogs on the world and then wanted to make it appear that your identity is tied up with the re-election of Kamala Harris, that she understands you. Well, because she's a Black woman, allegedly. And I would say, frankly, neither she nor Barack Obama nor Joe Biden understand me. And I don't think they understand the majority of working people. First of all, they trivialize how much working people know and how much they observe events within the country, political events, and international events. The American people are tired of poverty. They're tired of homelessness, and they're tired of the anxiety of not knowing whether their children will be able to live a decent life in this country. They're tired, they're exhausted. The working class wants change, and how it has to come. I mean, there's no way around this. So all of this talk about, well, Trump said he's going to keep the taxes of 2017 and yada, yada, yada. Well, we can criticize that. Should be critiqued. Supply side economics is not the economics of the people. It's been proven to be not the economic theory for the people. But on the question of war and peace, I don't think you could have done better than Donald Trump, given the choices that we had. I just don't think so. That's the way I would put it.
I agree, and I knew people, including me, who were convinced that if these people came back to office, that we were done, that we were either nuclear war, world war, some combination thereof. That it would have been cataclysmic for them to come back to office. So I don't think a lot of people complain. I don't think you and I are trying to argue that Trump is the second coming of FDR or Che Guevara, for God's sake. But I do think what we're saying is, given the context of American politics, the American people looked at Donald Trump and they said, those videos that I played, you ain't hearing them from anybody in the Democratic Party or anybody else in the Republican Party. You're not hearing someone say, it was the errors of the leaders of the U.S. that led to this conflict. Because conversely, that implies two things: that it can be fixed. Because if you go with the neocon, well, it's just that Putin's a madman and he's irrational. Well, then how do you fix an irrational enemy, right? It means Donald Trump's position implies that it can be fixed. And in fact, it puts a responsibility on him, us, however you want to put it, to fix it. As soon as he says Joe Biden was the president, if Joe Biden hadn't have done this, this war wouldn't have happened. He's now saying the leader of the United States took actions to cause it to happen, not the Russians. And he even goes on to show something that I have discussed that is critical for international politics: strategic empathy. He says, hey, the Russians saw us at our border. They got freaked out. I understand. You can have diplomatic relations with a country and resolve problems when you say, whether I agree with what you did or not, I understand why you did it. Because American diplomacy has been, as the old saying is, about saying nice doggy until you can find a rock. That is American diplomacy. And what Donald Trump does, it sets the table for realistic diplomacy that includes strategic empathy. Well, I understand why my adversary did that, and I take accountability over here for the things that we did that could have caused it. The power of that is it implies that it can be fixed, and it also implies that we have a duty to act to fix it, since some of the problems came from our side.
Oh yeah, and just like the clip that you played that he posted, that Donald Trump posted, of Jeffrey Sachs talking about Netanyahu and how Netanyahu was trying to get us into a war with Iran. I mean, why would he post that? I mean, he is sending a message, it's a gesture, saying something that you must take seriously, since he had already made statements that seemed to be supporting Netanyahu and the genocide. Maybe he was, or maybe it was misdirection. Maybe he was saying one thing while in substance attempting to maneuver to take a different position. Maybe Jeffrey Sachs's position is more his position than even what he said a couple of months ago, which were egregious statements. But, I think the nature of politics is so overdetermined by the media, both the main media and social media, that any president, anybody, by the way, even you, Garland, have to have a strategy that does not inflame people to make them begin to call you an enemy of the state. And then, what comes next? So we're in a nation where the relationships between the rulers and the state and the masses of people is very tenuous. Don't underestimate this, I say to people. The people, the masses, as they are surveyed in poll after poll, are so dissatisfied with the way they are being governed and ruled that the majority of them say something different. It has to be changed. It has to be reformed. And some say we have to tear the whole thing down and build up something new. This thing with Luigi Maggioni, this young man, he openly, in almost broad daylight, kills a man who's an executive in a healthcare corporation. And he becomes an overnight hero. What does that tell us? What are we looking at? And so we're in one of those moments. I often say it could be a pre-revolutionary situation, maybe a pre-Civil War situation, maybe a long period of ungovernability. We just don't know yet. These things will have to be decided at the level of the people. And how they will go about doing this is yet to be determined. But the situation is fluid and dynamic. Those people seeking easy answers, you're going to be sorely disappointed. In a lot of ways, America is unique because of enslavement and because of the Black movement. Believe me, no country in the advanced capitalist world has ever had anything like the Black American freedom movement. None of them have ever had slavery. None of them have ever produced, although we celebrate European intellectuals, and in many ways they should be, but none of them have produced a W.E.B. Du Bois or James Baldwin or Martin Luther King. None of them. So the trajectory of transformation of this country will take on its own characteristics. We, in this country, yes, we can look to other nations' histories and learn as we must, but we cannot think we're going to get a roadmap from them. We will have to do the hard work of organizing, of thinking, of reflecting, kind of like the revolutionaries of the 19th century did for Europe. But that was then, and that was then. Now we must pick up this great burden of leading our nation and hence making a contribution to humanity that only we can make because the war makers are here. The great empire, the last great empire is here. This burden falls on us. And we cannot be intellectually and politically lazy. I say this all the time. I know I'm like a broken record, but Americans, and I would say Black Americans, are a geostrategic force, are a player in all of this. You know, Richard Haas, who was the president of the Council on Foreign Relations made the statement at the end of 2023, and I constantly refer to it, that the greatest security threat to the United States is not China or Russia or North Korea or Iran. He said it is the American people. And I take him as a person that kind of knows what he's talking about. The American people. And once you talk about the American people, at the center of the American people are the African American people. And at the center of the African American people are the African American working people. So if the American people are the greatest threat, then one must logically conclude that they are a geostrategic force. So for the geostrategists who know more about other countries than they do about their own country, I would suggest that in your calculations about geostrategy, that you have to factor in the people of this country as a geostrategic force. The fact that they are at odds, 70, even more percentage, up to 80% of them, say the US state does not represent them. They say that to pollsters over and over and over again. 25% say that violence would be legitimate to use to change the situation. You look at every institution over many years, they are all seen as illegitimate, facing crises of legitimacy. This is an empire that at least must secure the nation, the people of this country, in order to carry out its policies and aims in the world, to be the hegemon, to be the indispensable nation. They must be able to prevent uprisings of the American people. And they can't. They can't. Anybody that wants to know what the November 5th election meant in terms of world politics, understand what Richard Haas was saying, and he is right. You cannot fight China, Russia, or North Korea, or Iran if the American people are against you. And I would just say one other thing. You know, in some polls of people who said they are Republicans, now that could mean a whole lot of things. One thing we do know, that the Republican Party is the party where the majority of working people identify. In other words, it's not the Democrats. That's Franklin D. Roosevelt's Democratic Party. Today, the majority of working people identify with the Republican Party. And so there are polls that have been taken that showed at one point that Vladimir Putin, I'm talking about in the last year and a half, Vladimir Putin polled better than Joe Biden did. Can you get that? Vladimir Putin was more popular and was viewed more favorably than Joe Biden. These are unheard of events in the life world of working people. And you know, even when I look at polls, and I try very hard to see the class dynamic within the overall poll. You know, for example, if you're polling Republicans, probably you're polling more working people than when you're polling Democrats. You know what I'm saying? If you're polling independents, certainly you're polling more working people. So if a poll says Republican voters or independent voters are saying this or the other thing, I think one could rightly assume that these are also the views of a good part of the working class. We're looking at, therefore, a working class uprising that has not yet crystallized into a movement to take power and to reverse the whole situation as we now live it.
I'll say one last thing. We'll run out of time, but one last thing, because who knows what's going to happen? As I said, we don't know what's going to happen on between now and January 20th. I'm on pins and needles with these lunatics in this administration. What war they're going to start, country they're going to try to overthrow. This one, they're going to try to overthrow this one. But let me add this: yeah, the Democratic Party is in trouble. The traditional liberal and neoliberal institutions are weak and floundering. Just throwing this out there. Here's what they don't understand. If Donald Trump comes to power and he actually is able to end the war in Ukraine, and if now, first of all, his numbers will go up dramatically.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, if Donald Trump somehow is able to turn the volume down on the conflict in Gaza, and a few months after Donald Trump's 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, both of those are in, the Democrats ain't in trouble now compared to what they will be in then, because there will be a large, the anti-war community, left, right, libertarian, or whoever, will be forced, even those who hate Donald Trump. And I'm not a fan of, quote, Trump the person. I evaluate Trump the political phenomenon. But those will have to say, man, 6 months ago, we were standing on the edge of annihilation looking at a genocide. If 6 months after this guy is in and we ain't looking at a genocide no more, who knows? He may make it worse. He may not. I'm not saying he will or won't. I'm just giving you a possibility. And if he's able to do what, let me add this, because he has said, I want to end the conflict in the Middle East and in Ukraine. And he said Ukraine will be harder and take longer. But let's just say, if he's able to end those, it's over for the Democrats. Over. They're in good shape now in comparison to what they'll be 6 months from now if he's able to do 50% the Ukraine conflict, 50% of what would happen there. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that. And if he swears off against a war with Iran, which wouldn't be a smart thing to do anyway, given this new alliance of Russia and Iran, no, he will, just on that level, he will be transformative because he will have defeated the neocon grip upon the government. If he refuses to go to war with Iran, he will have, in fact, repudiated the Zionist control of American foreign policy. You know what I'm saying? And if he can imaginatively begin to think through how we will solve the crisis of ordinary working people in this country, to give working people a sense that government can be an instrument to solve the problems of high mortgages, inflation. People talk about, oh, inflation is going down from where it was 2 years ago. Yeah, but it's not rising as quickly, but we start from where it was 2 years ago, where a dozen of eggs was $6 and $7. We start there. That's the new normal. So don't tell me inflation is not rising as fast, but we've already gone into the abyss. If he can rein in the forces that are attacking dissent, such as those parts of the FBI and the Justice Department, if he can dismantle the CIA, and in that post on his social media where he played Jeffrey Sachs, and at the end of it, he says that the CIA has overthrown governments in other countries and they will do it here. If he can rein that in, I don't know how you evaluate his presidency in relationship to all that came before it. And you cannot compare him, let us say, to Franklin Roosevelt because the tasks were different. Franklin Roosevelt faced a Great Depression, not a nuclear war. Hoover handed the presidency to Franklin Roosevelt, but a nation that didn't even have an army much to speak of. So we didn't have an economy and then a military-industrial complex that is a parasite upon the general economy. He didn't have to face that. He didn't have to face a $37 trillion national debt with no prospect of ever paying it off. And if the US dollar ceases to have this privileged position in the global economy, the nation might go bankrupt. And nations might start abandoning the dollar for gold or for the Chinese currency or even for the ruble. This is the global situation, but the domestic situation is so linked up to it. And I say this again, the American people are a geostrategic force because they can decide whether wars are initiated. Now, people say, well, the deep state can do whatever they want. The state can do whatever they want. Well, but then the people can respond and do whatever they have to do. Let us not forget, there was a war in Vietnam and there was an anti-Vietnam War movement. You see what I'm saying? So we're in that kind of dialectic right now. But I would just say this, don't rule the American working people out and don't rule Black people out because our unique history brings something of immeasurable value to the American people. And of course, as Black people, we have many tasks to complete. One, we have to get control of this fake pop culture that seems to have taken over a good part of our young generation. We have to free them from that. Not a celebrity culture, but a liberation culture, a freedom culture. You understand? And it can be done. A lot of the rap and hip hop culture that is rooted in celebrities and branding and advertisement and actually demeaning of Black people, that has to be rejected. It has to be critiqued, remade for a generation whose eyes are on the prize of freedom. That's the way I'm looking at it. I think these are all realizable tasks. I think that the general political environment after the November 5th election is more positive than it was before that election. So you say, Tony, what are you saying? I'm saying, yeah, Donald Trump's election created more favorable conditions for struggle. Contrary to what friends of mine like Cornell or Angela Davis might say, oh, we have to elect Kamala, of course that gives us time to struggle. Yeah, it gives us time. Well, I thought you told me that Hillary was going to do that. I thought you said that Kerry was going to do that. And now you done had all this time. Don't seem like you did very much with it. So I am suggesting that courage on the part of activists, and especially intellectuals, that the people look to it to explain the world. Courage is necessary, and a type of courage that is not afraid of the truth, that puts the truth ahead of everything, and is not seeking easy answers and rhetorical responses to a great crisis.
I agree with you. And I always like to, I'll glance in the chat, everyone. every once in a while, and I like to respond before we go. A quick response. A couple people. Trump's a jerk. Trump's an ass. Trump's a this. Trump's a that. I'll say this. Those things may be true. I'm not saying Donald Trump is the nicest, greatest, smartest, most wonderful person ever. Here's what I'm saying. You know what? A lot of people know I was in law enforcement for years, and when I was a corporal, I had this sergeant, and he was an ass. And oh, he rode everybody, including me. And he was, I mean, you know, you talk about OCD, right? And to this day, he's an ass. But here's what I'll say. If it hadn't been for that ass, I would have never got promoted all the way up to major. Why? He was so hard on me. He was so tight on me that I realized I couldn't make a mistake under him. Everything had to be perfect. Every dot had to be crossed. Every T had to be crossed. Every I had to be dotted. I handed it in a report, and it was perfect. He took the report and gave it back and said, "You have to redo it." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because the edges of the paper were wrinkled." Right? But that created a dynamic where I was like, okay, everything I do has to be perfect. That created a dynamic where my work was exemplary, because I had no other choice. And that is what got me promoted time and time again, because I got into a mindset over the course of 1 year working for this guy, that I'm like, you can't make any errors and nothing can be a mistake. So the guy was an ass, but if it wasn't for him, I would never have been promoted all the way up to 4 more. I ended up being his boss.
Wow.
But I can thank him and I told him, and I thanked him for it, right? And he was a weird, he still thought I hated him, but at least I thanked him. My point being, the fact that an individual has weaknesses or strengths or good or bad things about him, if you're looking, as they say in Washington, D.C., if you want a friend, get a dog. If you're looking for, get a dog. Dogs are great. They love you. They wag their tail. You know, they're great. Cats, dogs, get a pet. But as a person, they're going to have flaws and exceptional flaws. But because Donald Trump has these flaws does not mean that he can't be a vessel for the people to make change.
Yeah.
Rather than, if you're expecting himself to just come in and wave a magic wand and fix things, you got the wrong idea. You got to do some things here. Last thought.
And just, people who don't like Trump, that's cool. You're not supposed to like everything. You're not supposed to agree with you or I about everything. But let's have the courage to talk, to think together, to weigh the evidence together. That's all. You don't have to like Trump. You don't have to like me. You don't have to like Garland, although I don't see why anybody would not like you, tell you the truth, But in this moment, every person should use all the resources that she or he has to make the best analysis of how we move forward as a people. We are in a situation where the possibilities of moving forward are greater than they've been since the time of the Black freedom movement of the 1950s and 60s and so on. That's what I think. And everything must be judged based upon that. I'm a critic of commercialized hip hop culture. I'm a critic of celebrity culture. I don't particularly find Beyonce an appealing artist, but that's my opinion. I think we need to move beyond that to something that is more appropriate to our struggle for freedom and justice, rather than distracting us from that. I'm not a big fan of professional sports. When I look at the NFL, every game looks the same to me. I hate to say it, therefore I don't look at a lot of football games because it's boring. You know what I'm saying? But the more of a multi-billion, trillion-dollar industry it is, the more it is used to distract the people from what they should be doing. And people do treat it that way, as a distraction. But all of this is on the table, as you say, Garland. Let's discuss it. Let's think about it. You present your evidence, I'll present mine. You present your interpretation, I'll present mine. But don't think you're going to cancel Garland, Nixon, or me because you disagree with us. You can't do that. And at least even if you cancel me, I'm not leaving the stage right yet anyway. So that's the way I look at it. I think it's a great time. And I love the debate among ordinary people. I love that because for me, it's a way to get to know people better. You know what I'm saying? People disagreeing and debating, and you wrong, Tony, and you ain't S, and you ain't that, and all that. Yeah, well, let's talk it out. Because I feel very confident in the position that I have. Donald Trump is not a president of war. Start there. He is not a president of war. Biden was a president of war. And had Kamala been elected, there's no reason to not believe that that the war situation on a world scale would have gotten worse, that there would be possibly a strong possibility of a war with Iran, which would have been an economic catastrophe as well as a human catastrophe, that the war in Ukraine would have gotten worse, or the war with Russia would have gotten worse, had Biden or Kamala been reelected. Now, consider that. Put that in the equation, and then decide who you like and who you don't like. Because you're never going to know Biden or Kamala or Trump personally, so you really don't know what they're like anyway. You know what I'm saying? But put in the equation of analysis all of the factors and then prioritize them. What comes first? Well, I think war and peace, preventing nuclear war, etc. That's at the top of the agenda. The question of the economic welfare of the working people and the poor, that's second. Third, the end to all vestiges and practices of white supremacy and racism. That's on the agenda. The overcoming of all forms of gender discrimination and inequalities. But then factor who would do most for whom. And the big thing, and here I go back to Martin Luther King Jr. Can you solve any of the domestic problems and contradictions as long as the economy and the society is on a war footing? I don't think so. So war and peace, top. If you solve the war and peace problem, if you can diminish and in fact defeat the neocons, that is the war makers, if you can do that, you have brought the nation closer to solving some of the other problems. There is therefore no question then of Social Security going forward. Once you say we are not at war with Russia or China or Iran, then you answer the question that the people ask, well, why are you spending all this money on the military if we're not at war? You see, once you solve the war problem, you create conditions, especially for an empire, an imperialist empire. Solve the war question, the great question for humanity. You then have a way to think about solving the other problems. The discourse radically changes. That's what I wish to say.
I'm with you 100%. I've often said this. Look, there, and you probably heard me say it. When I go to the grocery store, I don't see something that says this is the price for black, white people. This is the black for the LBGT. Now, if you want lettuce, we got to look and see, are you a female? Are you what gender? No, that's the price. And if you get the price of lettuce down, everybody's going to say life is a little bit better. And the other thing I got to say is the ruling elite, the whole and this the issue of like gender and this, oh, we're going to do gender and equality, we're going to do this and that. We can handle the ruling elite will never address those issues in a way that will be satisfactory for the working class. You let us, our morals handle it. Because we turn on an advertisement, and on the advertisement, you know how it is now. You've got one black person, one white person, one Asian person, one gay person. Every one of them looks like a Benetton ad. Every show you turn on. Well, let's see. The chief of police is a female, and her assistant is a gay person, and everything's a rainbow. Because you do that, that does not in any way say anything to us about the conditions for the working class out here, and whether you're symbolically giving the appearance of justice for all of the groups, when in fact you ain't doing nothing for no one. Because you know what? You go out in homelessness and you'll find all of those groups mixed into the homeless group. And so I think the big part of all of the fairness treatment and stuff is intuitively the working class knows we can't trust the ruling elite to make those decisions, to have that discussion, or to tell us how they're going to fix fairness. Because what we know is this: they're going to say, well, we've got to address anti-Semitism. And it's not because it's anti-Semitism is a problem. They're going to say that because people are opposed to a genocide in Gaza. And the only way that they can stop you from pushing back against the genocide is reinterpret anti-Zionism and anti-war as anti-Semitism, and actually use the Jewish people for human shields.
Yeah, especially and the Jewish people in Israel. And when they wake up to the brainwashing that they have been going through, it's going to be a hell of a day. I mean, and most people realize that all of the advertising, all of this, a gay person, a black person, a Mexican, a white woman, all that in every commercial, everybody's looking so happy and having, the weekend with their SUV and kids in the car and a beautiful house. Now, everybody knows that is such a fraud and an attempt to brainwash me that, I mean, it always happens in history when a ruling class is losing, they become more delusional. And they got all of these PR people and these experts in communication and how to manipulate imagery and branding and all of that stuff. But these people don't know anything. They're a failure. They cannot. The American people have heard it all and reject it all. Look at MSNBC. They're going down the toilet. And it's a good thing. They should. Joe Scarborough, I listen to them every day trying to figure out what the line of the ruling class is. But ain't nobody listening to you, Joe. More people listening to Garland Nixon than Joe Scarborough. And even when they listen to you, they don't believe you. The drama, the performance of it all is so thin and so fake. That was one of Kamala Harris's problems. People saw as fake. People could not explain, well, where did you come from? Let's get your biography straight. Are you from here? Were you raised in Canada? And it just could never be made clear. Are you the candidate of change, or are you the Biden administration 2.0? I mean, so people don't believe the ruling elite. And that's a huge and positive event in the Cold War, post-World War II history of our country. The ruling class has lost. People don't go to church anymore. Go to any church, they're practically empty, and all the people in there tend to be old. What happens when the church and religion and belief and faith no longer capture the people. It's
Yeah. Well, tell people before we go, tell people about your the free Saturday free school and where they can go to find out more.
just our website, the Saturday Free School. Put that in, will come up. If you want to know about the year of Baldwin, do your Google year of Baldwin, or just put James Baldwin, God's Revolutionary Voice, and you'll be able to see what we do. Every Saturday, we have an open discussion of some of the most poignant issues of our time, including democracy and types of democracy, civilization and democracy, which we'll be discussing this week. And we're on Facebook. We're archived. Saturday Free Schools, our Saturday discussions are archived on Facebook and on YouTube and on Spotify, by the way. So what we do is very transparent. We think that what we're doing is a contribution to the ideological clarity of the people, which is a necessary condition of significant social change. So that's what I do. I'm busy. I'm mainly involved with young people, and I thank them every day for being involved with me, because really I get a little tired of older people. They give up, except for you, Garland. I mean, how do you keep a beautiful smile on your face every day, man?
Oh, I guess I just don't have sense enough to know better.
Yeah, right.
Ignorance is bliss.
Thank God for the crazy people who know no better and always see a positive way out.
That's it. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. And don't forget, share this on all your social media platforms. Go to all of the places that YouTube, etc. I mean, and Facebook, etc., where Dr. Monteiro said that you can find the information for the Saturday Free School. Share this on all your social media platforms. And now there's a membership. You'll see the join button. Please click on the join button and become a member of this channel. Make sure if you haven't subscribed, you subscribe. Thank you very much. And we'll be back again soon.